French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen has suggested that Washington should compensate France for potential economic losses if the EU complies with U.S. recommendations to cut Russian energy supplies.
The US wants to stop the import of Russian gas. It will have consequences. The gas and electricity prices will probably multiply by sixfold for the French. The Americans would sell liquefied gas and will therefore make significant profits, so they should probably compensate France for the difference in prices.
Le Pen has previously insisted against anti-Russian sanctions on oil and gas, saying the French public should not be made to pay for the government's positions. That's as France's inflation rate is already its highest in 3 decades. We discussed Le Pen's proposals with economist John Perkins.
I can't imagine the U.S. paying such compensation, even if Biden wanted to do that. The Republicans wouldn't allow it, so I can't imagine that happening. The war in Ukraine is profiting certain businesses in the United States and Europe, military-industrial complex, and some of the energy companies are making money off this. I don't think there's any question about that. Most of the European countries have supported the U.S. as a union there. If Le Pen is elected, then that'll break down to some degree, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the countries. But I think there's been a real attempt to keep NATO together and to keep the European Union together here. And the countries of Europe do not want to aggravate the United States at this point in time.
Britons are also seeming to lose faith in the sanctions, as a new poll has revealed that the number of those who would accept fuel price hikes as a result of the sanctions against Russia has plummeted to 36%, down from 50% last month. Furthermore, 54% of respondents believe the financial situation in the UK has deteriorated since the latest wave of measures against Russia. That comes amid soaring fuel and food prices in Europe as Western sanctions hit Russia's transport and energy supply lines. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has weighed in on the West's sanctions policy, pointing out that such economic measures have actually backfired against the U.S. and the EU as regular people struggle to cope with skyrocketing costs.
The aim of the Western countries was to quickly destabilize the financial and economic situation in Russia, to provoke panic on the markets, to make the banking system collapse, and to create a massive shortage of goods in our stores. But we can now confidently say that this policy has not worked. The strategy of economic blitzkrieg has failed. Furthermore, the sanctions have now swung back to hit the initiators themselves. I mean, the inflation, unemployment rates, the plummeting economic dynamics in the U.S. and in Europe, leading to a decrease of their living standards, devaluation, and so on.
We discussed the effect of the sanctions against Russia with a panel of guests.
I think the Europeans underestimated the resilience of the Russian economy, which is quite foolish because they should have known from their experience with Iran that sanctions targeting women and children, basically, are not going to bring about the sort of change that Europeans and Americans look for.
The EU, the European countries, are not in a position to impose sanctions on Russia, in particular on the energy sector. Usually, it's the importer, not the exporter, which suffers the most if there's disruption of this energy supply. And this is what's happening to the European countries.
The sufferers from this particular economic sanctions are actually the poor. It's the poor who gets the major brunt of it, and the middle class. The leaders in Europe who's claiming that people should be eating less of meat and, having less of bath, they'll be the first one to have waste water in having a full bath and eating meat every day.
People are suffering across Europe because of the increased price of fuel, because of the increase in the price of food, and because of the general rapid increase in inflation. So when leaders speak in that sort of language, calling on people to shower less or to eat less, I think it's more insulting to the bulk of society than anything else. And the only people who will probably take him or her seriously are elites like themselves.
When the harsh reality bites the people's living standard. I think, as we found out in the UK, in some other countries, probably as time goes on, it's really a matter of how long people will tolerate that kind of situation with inflationary pressure, rising prices, cooking oil, and food prices, for example. It's really a matter of time, and people. I think the government will feel the pressure from the public.